Neurofeedback works, but the industry is disjointed and most providers are just guessing. I'm Dianne Kosto. I'm a mom on a mission. I found neurofeedback when trying to help my son because I needed measurable changes, not opinions. Since then, I've delivered neurofeedback across a dozen locations personally. I've helped well over 10,000 clients and supported more than a couple hundred businesses in implementing qEEG brain mapping and neurofeedback with a proven, data-driven system. I wrote From Trauma to Triumph, a mom's mission with neurofeedback, because when this is done right, it changes everything. Welcome to the NeuroContrarian. What counts as evidence? I was listening to the People's Pharmacy interview with Dr. Dale Bredesen, the neurologist known for his work on reversing early-stage Alzheimer's through personalized multi-factor protocol, when something he said caught my full attention. He described submitting a proposal to study his personalized Alzheimer's protocol. The response? It was rejected because it was too complicated. His statement resonated with me instantly because I've heard versions of that same response for years in the world of neurofeedback. It hasn't been proven. There's not enough evidence. It's too individualized. Neither Dr. Bredesen's protocol nor neurofeedback tends to produce the kind of randomized controlled trial that science calls the gold standard. Both are built around the individual, not the diagnosis. A trial works by enrolling people who match on the underlying cause, so the only thing that varies is the treatment. But someone can walk in with a TBI, a concussion, or lingering brain fog after serious illness and show nearly identical symptoms, while the insult to their brain was completely different. So if the people in the study got to the same symptoms by different roads, matching them on symptoms alone does not give you the kind of trial that a randomized control trial needs. So the RTC trial becomes the gold standard for a good reason. Isolate one variable, compare it to a placebo, and then with real confidence that the treatment and only the treatment caused that change. That's the right tool for bacteria and one antibiotic. The problem isn't the tool, it's that a lot of what makes people sick and what helps them get better isn't one single variable. So look at the Alzheimer's drug trial specifically, and the pattern is really hard to explain away. Between 2002 and 2012, there were 244 drug trials that were run for Alzheimer's, and 243 failed outright. The one exception, memantine, produced a modest benefit at best. Nearly all of those trials tested one drug in isolation against a placebo. Dr. Bredesen has a way of putting why that keeps happening. Picture a roof with 36 holes in it. A patch might work perfectly for one hole, but the roof still leaks. That's not proof that the patch is worthless. It's proof that one patch isn't the solution for 36 holes. It's also not a new problem in medicine. HIV wasn't beaten by one antiretroviral. It took 3 drugs working together. Cancer, cardiovascular disease follow the same rule. Combination approaches outperform monotherapy in nearly every complex chronic illness we've studied. Alzheimer's trials have mostly stayed single drug. That's not necessarily evidence the disease can't be treated. Maybe it's evidence that a multivariable disease cannot be treated with one drug. Ironically, while critics continue to debate personalized approaches, the evidence continues to grow. A case report published this year in the International Journal of Translational Medicine followed a woman diagnosed with posterior cortical atrophy, a rare, visually devastating form of Alzheimer's that historically has been considered untreatable. After undergoing a personalized precision medicine protocol that addressed multiple contributors, including Bartonella infection, mold toxin exposure, metabolic health, inflammation, sleep, and brain training, she didn't simply stabilize. She regained the ability to read. She began using the computer again. She returned to cognitive training. MRI volumetrics showed measurable improvements in several brain regions, including the parietal, occipital, and hippocampal area, and the gains held for more than a year. The authors of the study were careful about what they were and weren't claiming. One case doesn't prove the approach works. It argues for a real controlled clinical trial, and for including this kind of workup in how PCA gets evaluated in the first place. That's an important distinction, and I respect them for making it. One case report doesn't establish a new standard of care, but shouldn't it create curiosity? A case that looks familiar to me. I have my own version of a case like that from our own files. A 74-year-old client came to us with a genuinely tangled picture: mitochondrial deficiency, MC1, ADHD, and lingering trauma from a cervical disc injury in a car accident years earlier, decreased balance, muscle weakness, shortness of breath, cognitive fog stacked on top of an old injury, stacked on top of metabolic condition that nobody had connected to the rest of it. So she went through 40 sessions of personalized neurofeedback. By the end, she reported a 73% overall reduction in her symptoms, with improvements in impulsivity, anxiety, depression, attention, and memory. Her metabolic checklist score dropped from a 66 down to a 32, in the right direction, alongside with real improvements in her fatigue and headaches. Her qEEG brain map comparison told the same story at a different angle: 45% overall change with 51% reorganization, and get this, 49% towards normalization. Neurofeedback was one part of her care. When the brain's learning but someone still doesn't feel better, that's a signal to look elsewhere. A sleep specialist, mental toxicity, diet, whatever else may be in the way. That's what addressing the whole person looks like in an interconnected system, not a checklist of isolated complaints. The symptoms we track aren't a fixed checklist. The client, and sometimes their therapist, works with our team to decide what to measure: anxiety, sleep, memory, whatever's actually showing up in their lives. Progress against those symptoms always gets rated by the client themselves and also by somebody close to them: a spouse, a therapist, tracking the same symptoms but independently. The qEEG comparison map is a different kind of evidence entirely. It has nothing to do with what anyone says or observes. It's a record of what the brain itself was doing before and after, measured by technology. A 36-year-old client with a history of 2 concussions, one from sports, one from a car accident, came to us with anxiety, depression, memory problems. After 50 sessions, the client subjectively reported like a 70% reduction in symptoms. Objectively, on the qEEG map report, we saw 38% overall change, with 60% of that moving towards a healthier, more normalized pattern. Subjective and objective data pointing to the same outcome. A good skeptic would raise the obvious point here: case study can be misleading. People improve for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with the intervention, things like expectation, time passing, or something else changing in their life at the same moment. And personalized can become its own trap. If a client doesn't improve, it's tempting to say they needed more sessions, they didn't follow the training plan closely enough, or other medications were interfering, rather than concluding that it's not working for that person at that time. That's a possibility, but it doesn't change the pattern we've seen or the one Dr. Brennison describes in his own patients. A single case can be a fluke, but a personalized multi-factor protocol producing the same shape of change over and over again in genuinely complex cases, and having that change show up in both how someone feels and an objective measurement taken independently of what they said, is exactly the overlap a good skeptic should look for. Whether anyone ever turns it into a published study or not, this is what we do with every client. We start with a baseline qEEG, a real picture of what's working for that person and what isn't, before we begin the neurofeedback sessions. Could they hold a conversation, read, sleep through the night, get through a work day? From there, we watch the trend lines as training progresses to see whether the brain's actually responding, not waiting until the end of the program to find out. We track whether those functional things come back stronger, and whether that lines up with what the qEEG is showing. We follow up months later, not just when the sessions end. Look, I get that decades of clinical experience and thousands of patient stories aren't the same as a targeted randomized controlled trial, but when people consistently report sleeping better, thinking more clearly, reducing anxiety, improving focus, simply getting their lives back, and We also observe measurable changes in their brain activity with a qEEG brain map and neurofeedback data. Those outcomes deserve investigation, not automatic dismissal. We're not waiting for that trial to keep doing this work. I say it all the time. We already use technology to understand and improve nearly everything else in the body, the heart, the gut, hormones, sleep. It's strange to draw the line at the brain. Many of the people who find us have already spent years and a lot of money chasing the solution. As the technology keeps improving, becoming more affordable and accessible, more of those people will have somewhere to turn sooner. None of this is a silver bullet or a magic pill, and we don't treat it that way. It's one tool used alongside everything else a person needs, but it's a tool that's working. That's reason enough to keep using it while the research catches up. Patients don't experience life through p-values. They experience it whether they can work again, remember a conversation, read a book, enjoy dinner with their family. Even the FDA agrees those things count. It accepts that patient-reported health-related quality of life as legitimate evidence, not just a soft add-on to the real data. Science should absolutely remain skeptical, but skepticism should lead to better questions, not closed doors. Part of why this is hard to study is that the problem itself doesn't move in a straight line. Brainwave dysregulation is closer to solving a Rubik's Cube than following one clean path. Some places turn forward, some turn back, and then reverse again, always moving towards one thing: better overall regulation. Dr. Brennison made a point in that same interview that stuck with me. It really doesn't matter whether his colleagues are convinced. What matters is whether people are getting better. And I agree with him. I think that about every time I read something a client wrote, such as last week, I woke up, I felt good, the most normal I've felt in a dozen years. It hit me that day. Things are changing. Or like a mother who described her daughter who has ADHD and autism, she wrote, "It no longer feels as if her brain is on fire." No randomized controlled trial captures that, but that's the whole point of this work.